Music. A beautiful method of expressing complicated emotions, as well as just having fun. It can tell stories, speak for those without a voice, help to relieve stress, and serve as permanent reminders of a place and time in your life. Every song takes me back to a place and time, and I'm sure many of you have anecdotes for that notion too. And if you're watching this video, I'm sure certain songs evoke a very specific attachment. An attachment to a video game and the memories you have with it. And while that might seem odd to those out of the know, there are good reasons for it. Not too long ago, everyone was strumming on fake plastic guitars, pretending to play Freebird while staring at a TV screen. The games were Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and they were at the center of a massive cultural phenomenon, having profound effects on both the music and video game industries, introducing younger generations to legendary music, giving lesser-known bands and musicians a chance to shine, elevating sales of music across the board, all while creating a fun and addictive paradigm for players to connect with music new and old, and challenge them to improve. The studio that led the charge in this earth-shaking revolution was Harmonix, a team of musicians that also happened to make games, and what they achieved is nothing short of magical, bringing people together through the power of music and giving players a deeper appreciation for it at the same time through game design, even if none of its players were actually musicians. And within a few short years, it all vanished. There have since been attempts to recapture that rhythm game boom, but never will those heights be reached again. Though the games live on in the hearts and minds of those that fell in love with them, one can only wonder, what the hell happened? I mean, seriously, how did the two Goliaths of music games simply vanish from the public consciousness? Sure, Rock Band 4 saw continued support for a long time after it was released, but it never reclaimed its former popularity. Meanwhile, Guitar Hero as a franchise is simply dead. A lot of factors contributed to this. Some were the fault of the publishers, while others were due to circumstances beyond their control. The decline was sharp and immediate, rendering this era a mere blip in video game history. However, that blip certainly left a huge impact. Nostalgia comes and goes in waves as the generations that grew up with each era reach adulthood. We've seen it in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and even the early 2010s are starting to be viewed as nostalgic. Recently, I was having a conversation with a friend about Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and memories came flooding back to me. Memories that had lain dormant since the end of the aforementioned rhythm game boom. I played Rock Band 2 every weekend with my family in 2009. I played Guitar Hero 3 regularly at my friend's house on PS2. I was enamored with the concept of being able to play these songs I loved without, actually learning how to play a real guitar. Even though learning guitar would have allowed me to express myself, the games were all born from a love and respect for the music. That streamlined gameplay experience of strumming on a fake guitar with buttons resonated with a lot of people, but for a while I thought that was all it was. It was just a casual way for people to feel as though they were playing the music they liked. But there was always one thing on the back of my mind. At the peak of Guitar Hero 3's popularity, I saw countless videos of people attempting to get full combo world records playing Through the Fire and Flames on Expert. This looked completely foreign to me, as though they were playing an entirely different game. In order to hit certain walls of notes, they would even strum with their elbow while hitting the frets with both hands. Only recently, after the discussion I had with my friend, I began to wonder, did the game actually prepare you for this? Are these games actually brilliantly designed? I was extremely curious as to what a critical evaluation of these games would reveal, in addition to being intensely nostalgic for them. It would no doubt shed light on why the games rose to popularity, why people still perfect their gameplay, and why it all seemed to burn out so quickly. I decided to go back. I went bargain hunting, I went thrifting, and I found the equipment I needed. I started playing through Harmonix and Neversoft's back catalog of rhythm games. With a full set of instruments taking up space yet again, I was ready to get the band back together. With this video, I wanted to examine why Guitar Hero and Rock Band were genuinely excellent video games, the factors that weighed down on their continued success, and ultimately, examine what remained. This is going to be a comprehensive look at the two rhythm games that rocked the world. I'm Liam Triforce, and this is a retrospective on the two titans of the rhythm game boom, Guitar Hero and Rock Band. We should start off by talking about the people responsible for the deep cultural impact we felt. Harmonix. Harmonix was founded in 1995 by Alex Rigopoulos and Aaron Eguzi, two students at MIT. The two had overlapping interests and skill sets. While Aaron was a computer science major and played classical music as a hobby, Alex was a music composition major and hobbyist programmer. While at MIT, the two programmed a way for people to use a joystick to control a program that algorithmically generated music. And in an interview with CNN years later, Alex recalled the enthusiasm people had over the ability to express any musical idea they had through a game controller. The spirit of Harmonix was born right then and there, as the basic concept carried over into all of their business ventures. At first, they found little to no success. At one point, they worked with Disney to create an experience at Epcot. It used infrared sensors to track the position of your hands, and if you moved them higher or lower, the pitch of the music would rise or fall. They also tried to bring their ideas and technology into the karaoke industry in Japan, but they didn't make it very far. But, while in Japan, the two had a realization that would forever cement the company's trajectory. They discovered rhythm games like Dance Dance Revolution, Beat Mania, and Parappa the Rapper. While making music as a form of artistic expression accessible to everyone was a great goal, the reason karaoke and the Japanese rhythm games they played were so successful was not because they enabled that expression, but because they allowed people to perform music they liked as closely as possible, with a low barrier of entry and rewarding gameplay incentive, be it a high score or unlockable levels and features. All the same, I still believe this carried the spirit of their original objective of letting people play music easily through technology. With this revelation, the two pivoted into game development, laying off 40% of their staff and essentially starting from scratch. 6 years after the company was founded, Harmonix developed their first commercially available video game, Frequency, published by Sony for the PlayStation 2. You can think of this like the Y2K precursor to Guitar Hero. Basically, you need to play 2 measures perfectly and then immediately switch to another track to keep your combo going. As you pick and choose which track to play, vocals, bass, drums, guitar, etc., you'll be creating some on-the-fly remixes depending on which stems you manage to keep enabled through your combos. You can also use power-ups to assist in maintaining combos, like score multipliers and an auto-completion power-up, which are awesome when used effectively and strategically. You can probably observe the influence this mechanic had on Star Power and Guitar Hero. The biggest problem with Frequency, in comparison to its sequel Amplitude, is that it doesn't do a great job at actually teaching players how to perform well. Amplitude sets you up for the game far more through detailed tutorials, using arrows to denote open phrases for you to play, and it also has these goofy, low-poly character models vibing to the music in the corner of the screen. The entire game just oozes the aesthetic of an animated film that takes you through an early visual realization of surfing the web and exploring a network of computers, like Reboot. I love this stuff, I don't know why. While both games were critically successful, they didn't sell very well. Alex later attributed this to the complexity of the gameplay and its lack of comprehensibility and mainstream appeal. Thankfully, the game scored them a deal with Konami to create Karaoke Revolution, which were not only hugely successful, but also pretty much provided the basis for the functionality of Rock Band's vocal track mechanics. Match the pitch of the vocals to the best of your ability, and aim for a high score. The game also automatically adapts to the octave you're singing in, accommodating for players with a more, let's say, limited vocal range. Harmonix also developed something other than a rhythm game for the PS2 iToy, if any of you even remember that thing. A hoverboard racing game called Antigrav, released in 2004. To date, it remains one of Harmonix's very few non-music-based games. And although it received relatively lukewarm reviews in comparison to their other projects, according to them, it far outsold Frequency and Amplitude. This had them pretty miffed about the prospect of continuing down the rhythm game path. But their troubles would not last long. Shortly thereafter, the peripheral manufacturing company Red Octane contacted Harmonix, being huge fans of their games. Red Octane proposed the idea of Harmonix developing a game for a guitar-shaped controller, inspired by the Japanese rhythm game Guitar Freaks, which had pretty much remained in Japan, with few real attempts to bring it overseas. If you compare the controller for the PS1 conversion of the game to your average Guitar Hero controller, as well as its functionality, you can see just how much of an influence it had on Guitar Hero and its controller. To my knowledge, Konami did end up suing Harmonix for allegedly violating patents they filed years earlier, but this was settled out of court. Both Guitar Hero and Rock Band were targets of multiple suits over the years, as you could imagine, because rhythm games ended up turning into a billion-dollar sensation. As it turned out, the genre's future was not as bleak as Alex and Aaron once feared, and they got to be the ones to ensure its future. The story of the original Guitar Hero is one of passion. The game came into existence because Red Octane and Harmonix both thought the game would be fun, without any notion of success motivating them. In fact, multiple companies turned down the idea. Though Red Octane founders Kai and Charles Huang managed to raise $1.75 million for their idea, they were turned down by people such as Greg Fishbach, one of the founders of Acclaim Entertainment. Acclaim went under in 2004, with Greg understandably regretting the decision to pass on the idea. Conversely, Harmonix had also been influenced by a statement made by Ed Fries, former vice president of publishing at Microsoft. Microsoft passed on Frequency years earlier, stating that no rhythm game would succeed without a custom piece of hardware. This piece of advice ended up inspiring Harmonix to take on Guitar Hero. So yeah, both companies were passionate about the idea, and they just had fun doing it. Revisiting the original game now is such a delight because you can feel the passion everyone had for the project. A lot of the bonus videos you can unlock offer insight and commentary on the game's development. From creation of the game's now iconic cast of characters, to an inside look at Wave Group Sound's recording studio, the company that performed all of the pretty authentic sounding covers for the game's soundtrack. You can tell how much fun they had making this game just from watching the footage of them goofing around and talking about it. For the game's visual aesthetic, they decided to pivot away from the abstractness of frequency and amplitude, as well as opting not to use videos of live performances. Instead, the artists at Harmonix came up with their own style, something that would give the game identity beyond just the controller. The characters in Guitar Hero all stand as representations of different eras and styles of rock music. Johnny Napalm, for example, with his exaggerated green mohawk that could slice boulders, stands as a representation of punk. Axel Steele, with his spiked denim jacket and shoulder-length hair, is the hard rock and heavy metal guy, evocative of melodic metal from the 70s and 80s like Metallica, Motorhead, and Black Sabbath. Pandora's gothic aesthetic reminds me of goth rock like The Cure. While you can probably imagine who Clive Winston was inspired by, if you catch my drift. It gives the vast ocean of musical stylings within the rock umbrella some representation, as well as giving players an identifiable genre to latch onto as they play through the game. Let's talk about the controller, as it very much informed the gameplay of Guitar Hero. It uses the basic framework of Guitar Freaks with the fret buttons and strum bar, and the controller itself is modeled after a Gibson SG. Most of us know the basic gameplay. You need to press down the correct fret buttons in time with the music and strum to play each note. The more notes you hit without missing, the higher your score multiplier goes. Aim for a high score, and have fun. Also, I'm just gonna warn you, my gameplay in these first couple of games is pretty mediocre, as I was just getting back into the series, after like years. The Guitar Hero controller has 5 fret buttons instead of Guitar Freak's 3 buttons, leading to some incredibly dynamic and challenging gameplay to master. You'll need to master what is essentially an extraordinarily simplified version of fingering on a guitar, in which you use your 4 fingers, your index, middle, ring, and pinky, to play the green, red, yellow, and blue notes, but when oranges come at you, you'll have to move your hand down to play them more comfortably and reliably, as well as shift your hand back up to play more complicated charts that have you jump up and down the frets. When strumming to play notes, you can either tap the strum bar up or down, and when fast notes come at you, you pretty much need to alternate up and down to play the song without getting carpal tunnel. That being said, strumming makes fast and aggressive charts possible, as you can simply keep the corresponding fret button held down while you strum over and over. Though you can play Guitar Hero with a normal PS2 controller, even using a control scheme similar to frequency and amplitude, the fast charts are naturally much more demanding without a strum bar. That said, I have a friend that exclusively played on a controller for many years. Here's footage of her playing Guitar Hero 2 on a controller. I couldn't believe it. I liken this to playing fighting games with an arcade stick versus playing with a regular controller. While it depends heavily on the game itself, I couldn't imagine playing Tekken or Soul Calibur these days with anything other than a fight stick. But I perform better in Dragon Ball FighterZ with a regular controller. I guess it depends on what you're used to as well, but the fight stick gives me the advantage of more fast and accurate inputs in games that demand them. When it comes to Guitar Hero, pressing all of these buttons at the speed required is much more difficult on a normal controller, simply because you cannot offload the work by holding down frets in one hand and strumming in the other. You have to tap the buttons relentlessly fast, making the guitar controller not only an essential part of the game's design, but also an incredible tool for moving rhythm games forward. Of course, you don't have to grasp this right away. The game has a thorough and entertaining tutorial to teach you the basics, and the structure of the game's single-player career mode ensures a smooth difficulty curve. You have 4 difficulties to choose from. Easy, which only uses 3 frets, limits the amount of notes that appear, and moves at a much slower pace. Medium, which introduces a 4th fret and increases the amount of notes and the speed at which they appear. Hard throws in the 5th fret and increases the notes and speed yet again. Expert adds more notes and ups the speed one last time to ensure that you are playing every single note that the song features. You also don't need to play every song in a single venue on lower difficulties, so there's less pressure. The basic idea is that you complete the game on one difficulty, and because the game is so much fun, you'll want to come back after mastering that difficulty for a more substantial challenge, and to get better at the game. Ultimately though, all you need to do in order to progress through the career mode is pass each song, and while failing becomes more likely on higher difficulties as they impose stricter penalties on missing notes, the notion that you have to play every note perfectly is a self-imposed challenge in the long run, just to enjoy the satisfaction of hearing the songs you love play out as a result of your gameplay, as you hold that plastic Fisher-Price guitar. A lot of Guitar Hero is psychological in that regard, and the star power mechanic taps into that. If you play a sequence of these star-shaped notes perfectly without messing up, you'll fill your star power meter. Once sufficiently filled, you can activate star power at any time by tilting the neck of the guitar up vertically or by hitting the select button. This doubles your current score multiplier and lasts until the meter runs out. The feeling of doing this right before the chorus or solo is part of the reason I love the performative nature of Guitar Hero. Playing this game well is an incredible feat, as it requires a lot of practice and memorization. It's mesmerizing to watch people play Guitar Hero well, just as it is to watch a guitarist perform. While the two are entirely different beasts in practice, it's safe to say that Harmonix accomplished their goal of allowing people to play music they loved through the interactive medium. When talking about charts, something important to Guitar Hero's design is always its setlist. You need something focused, but not so narrowed down that it is alienating to people that don't like a specific kind of music. You also can't have it be too broad or spread across too many genres. More than that though, you have to choose songs that come together to create a smooth difficulty curve in each game. Guitar Hero 1 played it safe, focusing primarily on hard rock, as well as classic rock songs that everyone ought to know, while also very lightly tiptoeing into classic metal songs and modern pop and punk songs. The difficulty curve also makes a lot of sense. We begin with the easier guitar licks on I Love Rock and Roll and Smoke on the Water. Smoke on the Water's opening riff actually happened to be the first and only thing I ever learned how to play on a real guitar due to its simplicity. I have since completely forgotten it, but at least I can relive that experience here. The second venue throws in Iron Man by Black Sabbath, which has a slower tempo to begin with, but it has that awesome solo to test you on your knowledge and reflexes up to that point. Things get faster with songs like Fat Lip and Ace of Spades, but then you also have reprieves like Ziggy Stardust and No One Knows that are still challenging in their own ways, but are definitely not as relentless as stuff like Godzilla. These choices are not only sonically distinct from one another, jumping from one genre to another in a single venue, but they also provide different levels of challenge so that players of lower difficulties have some room to choose which songs they can pull off. At the same time, it also introduces variety into each venue so that playing songs back to back doesn't get stale. This would be the de facto structure for Guitar Hero sequels moving forward, and the setlist would only continue to expand in appeal and variety. Guitar Hero also features bonus unlockable songs, with them usually being songs performed by bands that have members of Harmonix in them, as well as lesser-known artists and even contest winners. So not only do you have classics in the setlist that you can enjoy playing and mastering, but you can also discover new music through either bonus tracks or inclusions in the primary setlist that you've never heard before. For younger generations, Guitar Hero ended up being a pretty awesome way for them to discover bands and musicians that were influential and important to the medium, which is always a huge plus. Needless to say, Guitar Hero transcends its intent of being just a mere rhythm game. Due to the nature of the controller, what it lends to gameplay, its ability to connect people with the music they love, and the music they will soon come to love, as well as the arcade nature of going for full combos, the game is as brilliantly and intuitively designed as it is addictive and satisfying. Guitar Hero's sales snowballed over the months following its release in November 2005, with each month's sales being larger than the last. Something was about to happen to the video game industry, and Harmonix got to work on a sequel as the snowball kept rolling downhill. A year later, in 2006, Red Octane and Harmonix released Guitar Hero 2. It is a great game, but you probably didn't need me to tell you that. It refines its art style to give the characters and venues more identifiable and memorable looks. It also tweaks the career structure in a few crucial ways. First of all, after playing the songs in any given venue, you'll be asked to perform an encore, and the song they choose is always a mystery, which makes it exciting to play through each venue. I know discussing music tastes in these games is going to be pretty subjective, but I think the moment I realized this game was better than the first was in its second venue. You have absolute bangers like Message in a Bottle, You Really Got Me, Strutter, and the admittedly hilarious cover of Heart-Shaped Box, all leading up to the Mystery Encore, which is Carry On Wayward Son. So much fun to play back to back, and the encores create moments like that throughout the entire career mode. War Pigs by Black Sabbath, Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, YYZ by Rush, and finally, closing it all out with Freebird. One of the most perfect songs for an ultimate challenge at the end, thanks to its iconic, lengthy guitar solo that pushes you to the absolute limit. Granted, the songs are moved around in the Xbox 360 version, but most of the encores are in the same place and deliver the same effect. The setlist also doesn't step outside of that focus on hard rock, classic stuff, and a little bit of metal, punk, and grunge, but the bonus songs do experiment a bit more. It even includes the series' very first meme song, Trogdor, as performed by Strongbad. In addition, Guitar Hero 2 adds a cooperative mode to enhance the multiplayer experience. While competitive multiplayer was always a huge part of what made the original game an immediate staple of house parties everywhere, the addition of co-op means each track in the game also has a rhythm guitar or bass track to accompany it. You can play through the entire game with a friend on bass, or you can take on the bass tracks yourself if you don't feel like performing face-melting solos every time. The bass tracks give the game a lot of replayability in a multiplayer context, and it would soon inform the future of Harmonix and the rhythm game genre at large. There's also a practice mode in which you can practice any or all parts of any song at varying speeds. It is an incredible resource when attempting to pass the more difficult songs. Finally, and this is a universal change, hammer-ons and pull-offs were reworked to be more lenient. Hammer-ons and pull-offs, or hopos for short, allow you to hit specially designated notes without strumming. I didn't touch upon this mechanic yet, but that's because in the original game, hopos worked like they do on a real guitar, and not like they do in the rest of the games. When you see a hammer-on note, you need to keep the higher fret button pressed as you tap the lower one, and the inverse is true for pull-offs. This makes them much harder to pull off reliably, so it was changed in Guitar Hero 2 to allow you to simply tap the next notes in a sequence without having to hold down higher fret buttons. It's a simple change that makes lightning-fast sequences of hopos across the guitar way more doable. On the whole, Guitar Hero 2 was an immediate improvement in every way over the first game, and coupled with its Xbox 360 port a few months later, it helped turn Guitar Hero into a phenomenon. The game sold extremely well, being the second best-selling game of December 2006, only behind Gears of War, and it can be seen as the true beginning to the rhythm game boom we experienced around this time period. Publishers quickly became interested in throwing money at Harmonix for their work on the series, and around the time of Guitar Hero 2's release, Red Octane was purchased by Activision for $100 million. Shortly thereafter, Harmonix was bought out by MTV. At the time, MTV wasn't exactly known for video game publishing, but they and Viacom had connections within the music industry that would ensure Harmonix would be able to make the games they envisioned. Harmonix was still contractually obliged to complete Guitar Hero Encore Rock the 80s, but after that, they had to say goodbye to their baby. Neversoft, of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater fame, was eventually selected by Red Octane to develop the next game in the series, as then-President Joel Jewett had a conversation with the founders of Red Octane during E3 2006, stating that Guitar Hero helped Neversoft reduce stress during the development of Tony Hawk's Project 8. Because, Activision had annualized the franchise since 1999 and intended to do the same with Guitar Hero, and Neversoft were the perfect people for it. To be fair, their output over those years was solid, only showing signs of slipping up after putting out 5 games in a row, with their only real misstep being Proving Ground. When you make a new game in a series every year for almost a decade, it's only natural that passion and innovation become increasingly more difficult to maintain. Unfortunately, Guitar Hero wasn't just going to be an annual franchise. More on that in due time. Anyway, When Joel got the call from Red Octane and was asked to work on Guitar Hero, this is what he said. "Fuck yeah, dude, we are all over that shit." And the rest is history. Guitar Hero 3 was my first exposure to the series. I was at my friend's house and I saw a group of people playing the game on PS2. I was handed the controller, told how to play, and it was like I was learning how to play an instrument for the first time, except the dopamine came from watching numbers go up. It made me feel like the protagonist in 2112, except rather than finding the device that can express powerful emotions through sound, I was holding an imitation of one. An imitation that honored the music and allowed me to connect with it, echoing Harmonix's original intent upon moving into the game's industry. I loved Guitar Hero 3. It certainly didn't have the leniency of the timing windows that you can feel in future games, and it's bullshit hard at times, but it has an awesome set list, the greatest multiplayer in the series up to that point, and the boss fights throw some much needed variety into the career mode structure. Plus, the game's availability on multiple platforms and the difficulty in its most iconic songs gave it an extraordinary legacy of its own. Guitar Hero 3 modeled its PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii guitars after the Gibson Les Paul, being much more subtle in design and a blank canvas for all kinds of stickers if you felt like decorating it. On PS2, however, we got the Kramer Striker. Ah yes, this sexy beast remains my absolute favorite Guitar Hero controller. Overall, I think people got a lot of mileage out of these controllers, using them well into the future of the series, and playing Clone Hero with them today. Neversoft recreated Guitar Hero's gameplay from scratch, and while Wave Group Sound did return to perform a handful of covers once again, this time they had access to master tracks, as well as other pretty cool things. First of all, Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols was going to be included, but apparently their record label had lost the masters for the song. Therefore, the surviving members of the band came together to re-record the song just for the game. A really cool event for a song from the seminal punk album. In addition, the game's boss fights feature appearances by Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine and Slash of Guns N' Roses, with new recordings by each guitarist, each showcasing their unique styles in the context of the game's battle mode. Improving on the versus mode from previous games, the battle mode has you fight your opponent by strategically using power-ups on them, which you collect by playing a sequence of notes correctly. You can force them to deal with double notes, increase difficulty, and just generally mess with their note highways in a variety of ways. It completely reinvents the traditional competitive experience, and when you factor in the game's online functionality, the game immediately has a lot of longevity as a multiplayer party game. Aside from the boss battles, the career mode structure is the same as Guitar Hero 2, but as mentioned, the setlist features far more master recordings after the second venue. I always thought that the covers added a lot of charm to the Guitar Hero games, as the game is about you climbing the ranks to stardom and becoming one of the world's best guitarists. But the progression from covers to master recordings in this game make it feel like you're truly working your way up the ladder. The setlist this time is awesome, and more than that, it is organized brilliantly, featuring a gradual climb from classic rock songs in the first venue with Slow Ride, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, and Rock and Roll All Night, to Mississippi Queen, Barracuda, and School's Out, until the battle with Tom Morello and Bulls on Parade signal a shift in genres moving forward. In the third venue, you have the pop rock killer song When You Were Young, the post-hardcore song Miss Murder, while the fourth venue gives you the Black Sabbath track Paranoid, the aforementioned Anarchy in the UK, and even Weezer to inject even more variety into the career mode. Topping it all off with the encore being Even Flow by Pearl Jam. This kind of variety continues throughout the career mode, and it's a huge reason why, despite using the same structure as the previous game, it doesn't get stale. Plus, you have the boss battles this time, and a narrative that involves you climbing to fame, signing various deals, selling your soul to the devil, going to hell, and playing in the devil's venue. This is where Neversoft fittingly grouped their metal stuff together, and with brutal songs like One, Raining Blood, Cliffs of Dover, and the battle track The Devil Went to Georgia, it's a great way to close out the game. Just from me describing this concept, and from watching the cutscenes animated by Titmouse, you can probably already notice a shift in style from the Harmonix Guitar Hero games. Personally, this game's style and tone is what I associate with Guitar Hero in my mind. the exaggerated, metal-reminiscent designs of the characters, and the over-the-top presentation just explode with personality and feel like a reflection of the music they generally focused on with this entry. One thing I will say about Guitar Hero 3 in comparison with the rest of the series is that it is extremely difficult. If you primarily play on medium, you will be tested, even without the 5th fret button. And if you attempt to play on hard or expert, your ass is gonna sit there and learn how to fret quickly. But I always liked that about this game. I felt like I could stick to medium and feel adequately challenged, making it a comfortable and challenging game to revisit every time I do another playthrough. The bonus songs in this game are pretty much entirely emblematic of the note walls that Neversoft liked to throw at you, and in the credits, you are introduced to what is indisputably the most iconic song in the history of the series, Through the Fire and Flames. While playing this song in the credits, you don't have to worry about failing and starting over. They just want you to attempt to hit as many notes as you can. And, yeah, I'm sure you know the rest. Here's a rundown of how it felt learning how to play the song. The opening lick is obviously the greatest test, as you have to jump between frets and strum ridiculously fast, just like Herman Lee himself. But once you clear it, you're in. The solo after the chorus is another difficult portion, but the second verse introduces some consistency. Naturally, the patterns throughout the song are difficult, but the greatest choke points come with the solo. This is where shit gets real. The second half of the solo here has cost me more attempts than I can count, even on medium. In fact, I could only clear this song, in the original game mind you, where the timing is much stricter, on easy. I could beat it on medium in Clone Hero, but that is far more lenient. For this video, I decided to buckle down and conquer the choke points that claimed my attempts in the past. Every time I get past the final portion of the solo and hear the vocals come back in, my heart begins racing. Now here I stand with blood on my hands. After a final chorus section, you are brought back to the intro riff one final time, and then the outro just serves to mess with you even more. If you can clear those last two things, you've made it through the Fire and Flames. Now, although I finally managed to beat this song on medium, I am pretty mediocre at this game if my gameplay wasn't already evidence enough for you. Imagine slaving away over this song on hard or expert. Man, I've always doubted if Neversoft intended for people to actually clear this song on expert. You pretty much have to elbow strum in certain sections to have a hope in hell of clearing this song. But with all of that being said, this song is an incredible representation of the determination and love people have for it, as well as this game together. Most importantly, its chart made me appreciate the song's immaculate structure as a power metal ballad, and that notion has been at the heart of Guitar Hero's design since the very beginning. It made me realize that Guitar Hero has subconsciously helped me to love and appreciate the way music is written. From Freebird to Even Flow to Cliffs of Dover, the way these charts are mapped give me a deeper appreciation for the music itself by forcing me to memorize their rhythms, take a deeper listen to their chords, and master it all through Guitar Hero's deceptively simple mechanics. This has been the core of Guitar Hero since inception, and this is why I feel Through the Fire and Flames was a defining moment for the series. It isn't quite the same as learning the chords on a guitar, but as a fan of music, it's an incredible thing. The series is a great boon not just to video games, but to music as well. Both mediums reap its rewards as art forms. This song's place is the hardest in the game, as well as its lyrical themes, make it representative of the blisters that formed as people attempted to perfect their gameplay. It is one of the most inspiring metal songs due to its attachment to Guitar Hero 3. And it is also emblematic of the incredible effect this series had on the music industry. The song quickly became the subject of various high-score competitions, even featuring in Guinness World Records. Dragon Force saw a 126% increase in CD sales after Guitar Hero 3, and their digital download sales skyrocketed. Apparently, Aerosmith made more money off of the spin-off game Guitar Hero Aerosmith than any of their previous albums. Then again, Bobby Kotick said that, so take that with a grain of salt. Guitar Hero was boosting the music industry in a major way, as well as being a household name in its own right, and a great way to have fun by yourself and with friends. And even so, this was only the beginning. Guitar Hero 3 made a lot of money, to put it lightly. But what of Harmonix, who were purchased by MTV? Well, they released their own game in 2007, shortly after Guitar Hero 3. Known simply as Rock Band. I always loved this game's ridiculous intro, set to Highway Star by Deep Purple. How are they staying on top of the cars? What are the instruments plugged into? Who knows? Who cares? It is a visual demonstration of the prevailing sense of camaraderie that permeated the multiplayer experience of this series. Rock Band is the natural evolution of Guitar Hero's gameplay, featuring guitar and bass just as Guitar Hero did in co-op, but also introducing drums and singing. All players need to perform well in order to ensure the maximum number of stars, and you can even save band members that fail songs by using the renamed star power mechanic, Overdrive. You can achieve bonuses by playing perfectly in unison, and the biggest change of all to the core gameplay, aside from the other instruments, each band member can individually choose their difficulty on each song. Guitar Hero, to me, was all about self-imposed difficulty. Is getting a full combo on your chosen difficulty more important to you than surviving? Or would you rather give Expert a shot and attempt to make it to the end in order to improve? Rock Band takes that concept further by giving you even more agency over the game's challenge. Whatever enables you to have the most fun without letting your band members down too much. While the guitar gameplay remains identical, and the vocals borrowed the framework from Karaoke Revolution, which makes sense, if it ain't broke don't fix it, the guitar controller received a bit of an overhaul. Rock Band modeled its guitar after the Fender Stratocaster, and it looks pretty much identical to the real guitar, just being a little smaller. The Rock Band 1 variation had a very ugly beige neck, but with Rock Band 2 they gave it a wooden coat of paint to make it look even closer to the real thing. The fret buttons are no longer these separate buttons slapped on the neck of the guitar. They each sit flush with each other so that it looks authentic. In practice, I find myself jamming my fingers on this guitar way more than I do the Guitar Hero buttons, and the strum bar, at least on the original Rock Band guitar, is horrible. It's silent, it's squishy, and I feel like overstrums aren't always my fault. It doesn't have that tactile, clicky response that Guitar Hero controllers have on its strum bar. The Rock Band 2 guitar is a lot better, but I still prefer the Kramer Striker. The drums, however, are the real star of the show in terms of innovation. The hi-hat and crash cymbals are placed symmetrically as identical, round buttons that you hit with actual drumsticks, and you have a kick pedal for hitting the bass drum. The gameplay is structured identically to Guitar Hero, but in practice, it's genuinely extremely close to playing actual drums. It's streamlined for sure, but then again, so is the guitar. It's all about keeping rhythm, just like actual drums. And thanks to the difficulty settings, I firmly believe Rock Band's drums can bridge into a real drum kit seamlessly. Of course, it doesn't have that wide range of sound you can get from hitting each drum lightly, or with the force of Maxwell's silver hammer, but if you crave that, the next logical step is playing the real instrument. That is absolutely beautiful, and I feel it would be a prime motivator for harmonics moving forward. In terms of charting, I've always felt that although the timing in Rock Band is much stricter than the future Guitar Hero games were, its charts are also way more friendly to casual players. A medium chart in Rock Band is like kindergarten in comparison to a medium chart in Guitar Hero 3. But that's also what makes it such a smooth transition in difficulty to hard, and then expert. I play expert bass in Rock Band all the time, and sometimes even expert guitar, because the game sets me up for higher difficulties. And it's also very much a party game, so they didn't want it to be too hardcore for those just jumping in. The career mode structure has also been entirely overhauled from Guitar Hero when playing with a band. It's this non-linear trek across the globe with you and your friends as custom characters, as you obtain stars and fans from various venues to get a van, a tour bus, a jet, etc. You can also choose to play mystery set lists composed of multiple songs, some pertaining to a specific genre, while others just throw everything at you. This gives you far more freedom, and allows you to deliberate with your bandmates on where you want to go and which songs you want to play. So long as you find ways to earn enough fans and stars to finish the career mode, whatever you choose to do is fine. Just don't play solo tour. It's basically like a stripped-down Guitar Hero campaign, and you can't even play bass when you're touring on your own. Thankfully, this was fixed with Rock Band 2, as it expanded on not just the career mode and all of the miscellaneous features like online multiplayer against other bands, online co-op and tour mode, and managers to earn your band different benefits, but best of all, the soundtrack is absolutely loaded with good stuff. Hungry Like the Wolf, Drain You, Everlong, Lazy Eye, My Own Worst Enemy, Rockin' Me, Testify, Livin' on a Prayer. It jumps between eras and delivers classics in every facet of rock and roll. It might still be my favorite setlist in either game series. See, with Rock Band, Harmonix had to choose songs that were not just known for their guitar parts, but based on how well they played with a full band. They had to consider bass, vocals, and drums as part of the equation, leading to an incredibly diverse and lovable soundtrack that doesn't stray too far away from the rock in the name Rock Band. Like I mentioned, my family and I played Rock Band 2 every weekend back when it came out, creating some incredible memories with both the music it featured and all of us playing in unison. Even though we weren't actually playing anything, the game made us feel like we were, and that's the beauty of it. Harmonix fully achieved their goal of getting people to play music in an accessible way, and with the addition of drums and its closeness to the real thing, they would only further zero in on that philosophy. For now though, let's turn our attention back to Guitar Hero. At this point, it was looking like the series would need to add other instruments into the mix in order to keep up with Rock Band. So they did, and Guitar Hero 4 would become known as Guitar Hero World Tour. Guitar Hero had a bit of an advantage in the rhythm game arms race due to the amount of money and credibility it had behind it, as well as the personality Harmonix imbued in the series before they left it behind. Not only could you customize your own characters, but you could also unlock costumes and whatnot for the existing characters like Judy Nails and Axel Steel. Rock Band's pre-made characters didn't really aim to have this amount of personality, because the focus was on you and your friends. Guitar Hero had both. Customization wouldn't be the only feature borrowed from Rock Band though. Oh no, the basic drum gameplay was lifted from Rock Band as well, with it even being compatible with Rock Band instruments. That said, World Tour's drum controller added actual electronic hi-hat and crash cymbals, which helped give drumming a more realistic and tactile feel, in contrast to the barbaric drumming you'd be doing on the Rock Band kit. The most egregious similarity it has with Rock Band, specifically with Rock Band 2, is its setlist. To be fair, there is no conceivable way they would have known what songs would be in Rock Band 2, unless they sent an undercover spy into Harmonix's office or intercepted classified documents or something, but the overlap with Rock Band 2 is ridiculous. I think they share around 16 songs, which is crazy if you're playing both games back to back. That said, they were all great songs, and Guitar Hero maintained its traditionally more difficult charts in comparison with Rock Band, so it's all good. World Tour also added tap notes in this game, which are basically like hopos if you could just tap the frets without having to strum anything at all to start the sequence. They were meant to be played with the slider functionality on the game's new guitar controller, but most people I know just play them by tapping the frets. With all of these changes, as well as the great inclusions that overlap with Rock Band 2's soundtrack, you'd think World Tour would be the game I prefer, right? Well, I think the career mode is kind of boring. It isn't as rigid as previous games, seeing as gigs unlock quicker and setlist lengths can vary, but it also goes on for way too long without any variation in how you approach the game. Thankfully, every single song is unlocked in Quick Play by default, so if you just want to have a good time with your friends, you can. Regardless of which game you prefer, it seemed like the future was bright for both game series by the end of 2008. Both games did well, and we had no reason to believe the fun would ever end. Unfortunately, while all of this was going on, the world began experiencing the worst recession since the Great Depression. The recession's effects lingered not just into 2009, but the early 2010s as well. The housing bubble burst, leading to the subprime mortgage crisis, and an eventual downfall of economic stability. Countless people lost their jobs, and people cut back on needless spending. But this video isn't about the economy. If you want to learn about that, watch The Big Short. Needless to say, this did not bode well for a rhythm game series that relied on people dropping money on plastic guitars and drums. Of course, if they continued to innovate and give each game purpose, I'm sure they could still warrant development of the series. And while Rock Band adhered to that philosophy, Activision did the opposite. They had a money-making machine on their hands, and they were not about to let the opportunity of profiting off of the Guitar Hero name pass them by. In 2008, we not only received World Tour, but also Guitar Hero Aerosmith, and 2 new Nintendo DS spin-offs that came with their own peripheral, designed to make the Guitar Hero experience portable. In 2009, releases only accelerated. Guitar Hero and its extended franchise received 6 games. 6, and 4 of them were developed by Neversoft. Guitar Hero Metallica, Guitar Hero Smash Hits, which was a pointless collection of songs from across the series that could have just been DLC, Band Hero, a game for younger players focusing more on pop songs, and the proper Guitar Hero 5 were all developed by them, and they all released in the same year. In addition, Activision also published Guitar Hero Van Halen and DJ Hero, developed by Underground Development and Freestyle Games, respectively. I mean, holy shit, you think that's enough? Why not allocate all of Neversoft's time and resources to making Guitar Hero 5 the best it could be? Who am I kidding? This is Activision we're talking about. Integrity and quality are completely foreign concepts to them. If one of their teams created an excellent work of art, worthy of discussion for years to come, they'd find a way to milk it so hard that people get nauseous just thinking about it. In spite of everything, though, was Guitar Hero 5 a good game? I mean, yeah, sure, but it isn't amazing or anything. It finally adopted a more non-linear approach to the career mode structure, allowing you to gain stars from any venue as you gradually unlock them. And it encouraged cooperative play far more, with its instrument-specific challenges on each song, pushing players to improve for bonus stars. That said, it is also a pretty drawn-out career mode with no real personality or flair like Guitar Hero 3, for example, instead focusing more on the unlockable musicians like Carlos Santana of the band Santana, Matthew Bellamy of Muse, Shirley Manson of Garbage, and Johnny Cash, and Kurt Cobain. Here's the thing about these inclusions. If they were just honoring them by giving them sequences where they play their own music, that would be great. But the reason this is so weird is because you can pick any of these unlockable characters, including Johnny Cash or Kurt Cobain, and play literally any other song on the game's soundtrack as them. Sorry, let me give a more specific example. You can pick an entire band composed of Kurt Cobains, export the soundtrack of Band Hero, and then have them perform Kung Fu Fighting. I've heard some people say that Kurt would have had a good sense of humor about this inclusion, and yeah, it's hilarious. But it's also a pretty bizarre, commercialized use of his image. Nirvana's catalog of music has been mostly kept away from the grubby fingers of executives looking to make a quick buck. This shouldn't have happened. But it is really funny in a morbid sort of way. That I can't deny. This isn't the first time a dead artist has been included as a playable character in Guitar Hero either. Jimi Hendrix was playable in Guitar Hero World Tour, which is its own can of worms entirely. I also don't think this is some sort of stain on Nirvana's legacy either, because Nirvana's impact on music was so gargantuan that a small blunder like this is just a curious piece of history now. I just find it hilarious that no one at any point thought to themselves, yeah, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. It is emblematic of a larger issue that was facing Guitar Hero as a series. Harmonix created Guitar Hero out of passion for their favorite art forms, and it had honorable roots in how it gave its players a deeper appreciation for music. Instead, Activision has twisted it into their prized cow, milking it for all they could while the recession loomed over them. It became a commercialized, bastardized version of the game that Harmonix originally envisioned. It was no longer about honoring music or getting people to play and enjoy it through a new medium. It was all about a race to see who could make the most money. A race that Activision chose to initiate, as Harmonix continued to work at a steady pace on games that they cared about. Games that actually contributed something to both mediums. Sure, MTV did have them do a couple of spin-offs, but every main entry actually had something to offer, and they never enforced the kind of output that Activision was. On top of that, when you combine Harmonix's continued efforts with the unnecessary, aggressive output from Activision, you can see how the market was quickly becoming oversaturated with rhythm games. Couple that with the recession, and you can see why the decline of the genre was so violent and swift. At the end of the day, Guitar Hero 5 sold less than half of World Tour sales, and all of the other games they released sold below expectations. Activision's gambit did not pay off in the way they probably hoped it would, and in 2010, they scaled things back quite a bit, only releasing a proper sequel to Guitar Hero 5, as well as a sequel to DJ Hero, as sales on that game picked up over time. Plus, it was a cool game in its own right, so it's nice that freestyle games were given another chance. But what was Harmonix up to during all of this? As I mentioned, Guitar Hero made a few artist-specific games, and while I don't have much experience with them, I know that they are loving tributes to each band, even if they did end up releasing during a cramped time for the rhythm game genre. From what I hear, Guitar Hero Metallica is favored by many, but it also heavily depends on how much you love each band. For me though, my favorite of these wasn't actually a Guitar Hero game. It was the Beatles Rock Band. Talks over inclusion of the Beatles' music in Rock Band began in 2006, between George Harrison's son Danny and the president of MTV. Apparently Danny was a huge fan of Guitar Hero and suggested a game based on the Beatles after learning Harmonix had been acquired by MTV. Danny was instrumental in bridging discussion between Harmonix, MTV, and Apple Corps, and the game was developed with the blessing of Olivia Harrison, Paul, Ringo, and Yoko Ono, who all provided critical feedback on visual and historical elements. The Beatles Rock Band is a visual and interactive history of the band. Though it uses the tired structure of the older Guitar Hero games, it works in this game's favor, as it walks you through each album, key performance, and overall phase of the band's run, even capturing their looks through the years perfectly. It begins in the cavern with material from Please Please Me, then comes the Ed Sullivan Show performance with color reference taken from photos in Apple Corps' archives, using songs from With the Beatles and A Hard Day's Night. The live performances continue into 1966, with the crowds even wearing styles that were prevalent in the 60s. Then, as the Beatles cease their touring plans, their music matures, with their albums becoming more sonically sophisticated. They spend more time in the studio, and the game reflects this. Once you get to this point, the game explodes with style, and it becomes a complete adaptation of their sound into a visual medium. Harmonix has always taken care to put detail and personality into the venues you perform in, and this game gave them the unique opportunity to honor the Beatles' music through the power of their own imagination and what they could derive from the lyrics. Sgt. Pepper's title track ushers in the era exactly as I always imagined it while listening to the album, while Yellow Submarine is as goofy as you'd imagine. Same goes for I Am the Walrus and Octopus's Garden. Meanwhile, Lucy in the Sky, and especially the mix of Tomorrow Never Knows and Within You Without You, lean into the psychedelia audible in their sound at this point, influenced by their time in India and, smoking a lot of pot. Abbey Road introduces a common motif of the tree on a hill, which becomes a fixture of a lot of their later work in the game. While My Guitar Gently Weeps implements various different colors and tones into the visuals and has it rain over the hill that is also featured in Here Comes the Sun. Come Together has a film noir style with high contrast reminiscent of the cover for With the Beatles. And when all is said and done, the game ends with what would be the Beatles' final live performance together on the roof of their own company building. I do really wish Billy Preston was up there with them in that part, but the rest felt wonderfully authentic to the footage and atmosphere of that performance. Even all of the charts for these songs feel more accurate to how the band performed them, as if the team studied how their fingers move on their instruments, or they watched the Beatles anthology over and over again, just to accurately recreate every minute detail. The game also features unlockable bonus material like photographs, audio recordings they sent out to the Beatles fan club, you can hear chatter and studio takes of songs during loading screens, and during the game's credits. The animated opening and ending sequences, which take advantage of mixed media to create an imaginative dreamscape inspired by each album's themes and the band's history, were produced by Pete Candeland and his team, who you might know for his work on Gorillaz music videos. It's a gorgeous, surrealist way to open and close a gorgeous, surrealist realization of the Beatles' music. The Beatles Rock Band is a labor of love, and to me, stands as a testament to what Harmonix has been about with Guitar Hero and Rock Band since the very beginning. It is not only an accessible way to play music with friends, but it is also an interactive way of appreciating how music is constructed as you challenge the harder difficulties, and it leaves an impact in a unique way. The game also sold pretty well, in spite of Activision's oversaturation of the industry and the impact of the recession. Despite respectable sales for a band-focused entry in a genre on the brink of collapsing, 2010 would end up being the final year of the rhythm game boom, with Guitar Hero and Rock Band going on hiatus after both of their next major entries were released. Even so, both of these games would embody each series' unique style completely, and I regard both of them as some of the most important games in the genre. Let's start with Rock Band 3. With sales on the decline, the game needed to shake things up in a major way. Harmonix, being a team of musicians, decided to take the next logical step beyond just adding new controllers, though they did end up doing that too. Enter the Rock Band 3 keyboard controller. Remember how I said Rock Band's setlists were chosen out of their appropriateness for a gameplay with a full band? Well, there were naturally a lot of keyboard parts in those songs that just fell by the wayside, and Harmonix finally made the decision to factor them in with Rock Band 3. The controller is a full MIDI keyboard, if you can believe it, but in terms of regular gameplay, it designates the 5 buttons in the center of the keyboard, which you can play in a manner that is most comfortable to you. It even lets you use a strap so you can play it like a keytar if you really want to. You might notice that each octave on the keyboard is color-coded as well. What's that about? Rock Band 3 doesn't just let you play its simplified version of the keyboard. With the Pro feature, you can actually play the keyboard, and the game has an extensive tutorial section teaching you how to actually play the instrument, right down to the correct finger positioning, the proper names for chords, and everything you would expect. Pro keys on Expert is identical to actually playing the song. Having both features as an option for all songs with a keyboard part is incredible for a rhythm game. But believe it or not, they didn't just stop with the keyboard. Harmonix also released a Pro guitar controller, both with buttons mimicking strings, and an actual Fender Squier, and with a MIDI adapter, you can plug in your real electronic drum kits and keyboards that are MIDI compatible. Rock Band 3 creates a bridge for its players to go from pretending to play instruments to actually playing them, all while maintaining the basic gameplay of Rock Band across all instruments. Rocksmith would take this a step further and allow players to plug in any real electric guitar, but the reason I consider Rock Band 3 such a masterpiece is because it not only bridges that gap and allows players to cross over to real music, but it allows musicians and non-musicians to play the same game together. That is simply magical. If that weren't enough, the game's career mode isn't a career mode in the traditional sense, as it is entirely challenge-based. You can progress through set lists in a similar manner to previous Rock Band games with road challenges, with each performance giving you a decent amount of freedom of choice in accordance with the genres it presents. But in order to actually obtain fans, you can complete challenges by doing basically whatever you want, whenever you want. Whether that means playing quick play exclusively with your band, or powering through road challenges, or going back for specific achievements, getting full combos, upstrumming, learning pro instruments, Rock Band 3 is your venue, and you are the star of your very own show. All of these groundbreaking features, coupled with the game's setlist broadening to incorporate more new wave and pop music from the 70s to the present day, as well as legendary full band songs like Bohemian Rhapsody, and compatibility with previous games' songs and DLC, Rock Band 3 is one hell of a video game. I personally consider it the pinnacle of the genre, and one of the greatest games I've ever played. It is both a realization of Harmonix's intent when shifting into game development, allowing people to play music without playing traditional instruments, and their original intent of giving people an accessible way to make their own music, as it doubles as both a game and a teaching tool seamlessly. After all, once you know how to play an instrument, you can begin to play your own music. It is one incredible achievement, and a watershed moment for presenting rhythm games as an art form, and something more than just playing pretend. All of this is what Rock Band is about. Meanwhile, Neversoft released their last Guitar Hero game, Warriors of Rock. While writing this video, I was browsing Reddit threads to see what were considered favorite games by Guitar Hero fans, and I saw a surprising amount of people mention this game. This genuinely surprised me, as I knew no one growing up that actually had this game, and its reviews were far more mixed than its predecessors. But these people singled out the redesigned career mode called Quest Mode, Quick Play Plus, and its setlist for praise. Then I mentioned the game to a friend of mine who said he absolutely loved it as well. So I tried it out, and though I did have major problems with its quest mode structure, when the game is showcasing its best material, Warriors of Rock embodies the most memorable and lovable aspects of Neversoft's Guitar Hero games, and demonstrates a huge amount of potential for future games in the series. The centerpiece of the game, the quest mode, is presented as an epic metal quest to find the legendary guitar and rescue the demigod of rock, after awakening several characters to their true power. The game gives you powers to use with each individual rocker during their chapters. For example, new character Echo Tesla has the Star Power Generator ability, which gives you a small amount of free star power for every 10-note streak you hit, basically allowing you to farm and maintain star power for a long time after activating it. Pandora increases the multiplier you receive from activating star power to an insane number, and Casey Lynch gives you a replenishing shield to protect against missing a note. Because of these powers, you can also achieve an unprecedented amount of stars by playing well, which is what progression revolves around. Much like the eras of rock that they embody, each character's chapters have you play a specific style of music. Johnny Napalm has you play a bunch of punk songs, Austin Teas has you playing classic rock, etc. It also just exudes personality, giving the game my favorite aesthetic of all the Guitar Hero games, especially as each character awakens to their powers. Like, Johnny Napalm starts crawling around on the walls and ceiling, and a Ramones cover of the Spider-Man theme starts playing. Judy turns into a demon, and Pandora looks like she stepped out of World of Warcraft. I love this stuff. While all of this sounds awesome in practice, I find it gets tiring quickly. Even with the amount of stars you earn, you'll have to play a lot of songs back to back. I suppose you could jump between chapters and play songs from across the map, but then it takes a long time to unlock any of the characters in quick play. In comparison to quest mode, the deliberate variation in subgenres of rock from previous games' venues was part of the reason career mode was so fun to play through. And while this game's powers make higher difficulties an awesome, more digestible challenge to conquer, it takes forever. I felt drained by the time each chapter was over, and if you don't like a particular style of music that a chapter focuses on, well, tough shit. You pretty much have no choice but to grind the chapters out, in spite of your distaste for the music. This is why having a broad soundtrack in a Guitar Hero game is a tricky balance, and why each venue in previous games gave you variety. The quest mode simply does not strike that balance due to its structure, on top of how long it takes to unlock everything. That being said, if you just jump into Quick Play Plus, go for challenges, and play with powers you've unlocked, in a similar vein to Rock Band 3, then this game has the greatest quick play out of any Guitar Hero game. I may prefer World Tour's setlist, but this game has a ton of great stuff as well, and the gameplay variety ensures that you could play this game for hours upon hours. I loved this game's quick play mode. On top of that, Warriors of Rock has 2 segments that are some of the greatest sequences I've ever experienced in a Guitar Hero game. To begin with, we'll talk about the game's finale, which features 3 songs by Megadeth, one of which was written specifically for the game's conclusion, Sudden Death. The charts are unforgiving, but you also get to assemble a team for the first 2 songs, and the final song lets you use all of your powers at once to give yourself an edge. It is an incredible power trip, and one hell of a spectacle to end the game with. And by completing the battle, you unlock a bunch of speed metal songs in the Demigod of Rocks chapter, as well as bonus stars for you to earn in every other chapter, if you feel like revisiting the game again for fun. I probably won't ever do this, but it's there if you want it. I love the way this game ends. It's a memorable sequence that perfectly captures the nature of the game, as if it were a heavy metal concept album expanded into a Guitar Hero game. But there's one sequence that I think tops it. On the quest for the legendary guitar, you'll find that in order to be deemed worthy of using it, you have to play 2112 by Rush in its entirety. More than that, the game says you must perform an anthem honoring the triumph of creative spirit over cultural oppression, which puts it better and more succinctly than I ever could. The members of Rush narrate the interstitials that bridge the gap between each portion and fill you in on its themes and world building, but the core of the song remains intact. Each segment visually designs what the song and its narration describes, incorporating the iconic Starman image, the cave in which the protagonist discovers the guitar, and even creating a stage for the grand finale in the sky, where despite the protagonist's tragic death, he can play his beloved instrument in the great stage in the sky. The discovery portion is one of my favorites in the entire song, which recalls the protagonist discovering a guitar for the first time, and it's a poignant recollection of how it feels to pick up a guitar in reality, or any other instrument for that matter. Incorporating this song into a Guitar Hero game was an extremely commendable decision, as I felt the spirit of the series had fallen to the wayside with Guitar Hero 5 and Activision's consistent milking of the brand. Not to sound like a broken record, but Guitar Hero from the beginning was about appreciating and connecting with music in a novel way. They honored this song's message by seamlessly weaving it with the game's narrative, and creating a game that stands for what both art forms are about, expressing emotion through their unique features. For music, it is conveyed through instruments, composition, lyrics, and all kinds of techniques unique to the medium. For games, it is about how the characteristics of a visual medium can be interwoven with interactivity, and what that interactivity lends to your experience. Warriors of Rock honors both in remarkable ways, and doing it through 2112 was just the cherry on top. When I was in 10th grade, I went on a trip that took us through Ohio. One of our stops was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which had a ton of exhibits dedicated to important musicians throughout the history of the medium. Of course, some musicians have objected to their inclusion or non-inclusion in the museum. The Sex Pistols were inducted, but Johnny Rotten called them a piss stain after being inducted, which is definitely in character for him. Trent Reznor has gone on record criticizing the museum, but he was still invited to induct The Cure into the museum, and he took it in stride, honoring them first and foremost over his personal views, even cracking jokes about his statements. A year later, 9 Inch Nails was inducted. The museum has its detractors, but that's not the point of this story. The point is, I bought Rush's greatest hits on CD there. I'm not quite sure why I did, as at that point, everything I could ever want to listen to was on the internet. All I knew was that I liked Rush, and I wanted to hear more of them. But little did I know, it would end up helping me more than I ever could have anticipated. I can't remember if I received the call or if it was the principal of the school, but I had to cut my trip short. I had just finished treatment for leukemia a few months prior, and I went for blood work shortly before I left. The results came back on the second day of my trip, just as we arrived in Cincinnati. My platelets were low, like dangerously low. They were so low that if I got a cut, my blood would be unable to clot, meaning that I could potentially just keep bleeding until, yeah, not good. I needed a transfusion, which meant a long road trip back home. The 2 librarians at my school, who were with us at the time, actually volunteered to meet my mom halfway, even though it meant a 6-hour round trip for them. At first, it was awkward. I just made small talk and listened to them chat with each other. Then I remembered, I had my Rush CD, and I asked them if they wanted to listen to it. Both of them were like, oh hell yeah! So there I was, listening to Rush with the librarians of my high school in the back seat of their car. I was not exactly in the best headspace after having my trip canceled due to an illness I already beat, still lingering over me, but it was there, listening to Geddy Lee sing about the durable creative spirit of music, soaking up Neil Peart's incredible drumming, and absolutely loving their delectable guitar solos, that I realized Rush was one of my favorite bands. I still have that CD. I keep it close by to remind me of why I continue to pursue writing, why I love art, and more than that, why I love music. If I could help anyone in the same way Rush helped me back then, I'll know that I've done my job. That's why when the 2112 segment ended in Warriors of Rock, and I was in awe of its execution and place in the game's narrative, tears were shed. This is what Guitar Hero is about. Sales of both Warriors of Rock and Rock Band 3 were not nearly as strong as previous entries, with Warriors of Rock selling less than half of Guitar Hero 5, a game that already performed poorly. Because of this, the rhythm game boom was officially over. Both series experienced a lull period before receiving their next main entry. Rock Band 4 sadly stripped away the pro instruments, but it was still fun in its own right. And now, Harmonix is introducing yet another new generation to music through Fortnite Festival. Guitar Hero unfortunately suffered a much worse fate. I never played Guitar Hero Live, but it was treated as a live service game, and its new controller with 2 rows of 3 fret buttons didn't catch on. It also stripped away all personality from the Guitar Hero franchise by limiting itself to live performances behind the note highways, and because the game's servers have been shut down, the only songs present are the ones on the disc. Even if there is some merit to its controller, I refuse to actually play the game today. It failed, and Guitar Hero is now as dead as a doornail. This is a crying shame, because Warriors of Rock exhibited so much potential for a future game. The game's style and power mechanics were so lovable. Imagine each stage revolving around a specific concept or album, and giving players greater incentive to challenge themselves in a non-linear manner like Rock Band 3's career mode. Imagine if Year Zero by 9 Inch Nails was a centerpiece to one of the game's chapters, or Ziggy Stardust, or The Dark Side of the Moon. How incredible would that be if you were able to weave these albums into a single narrative? They each have their own distinct themes and sound, which would also invite gameplay variety. Guitar Hero is still ripe with potential, but knowing Activision, I doubt such a project would ever come to fruition. But hey, if Crash Bandicoot can come back, then I'm pretty sure one of the biggest phenomena in video game history can get another chance. Right? Please? In the end, I believe both series accomplish a similar goal of honoring music as an art form, and allowing people to have fun by playing music in an accessible way. It had missteps, and it's clear to see why it all came crumbling down in hindsight, but what remains are not just fond memories, but remarkable accomplishments for both the interactive medium and music altogether. Today, Clone Hero serves as a replacement for the core multiplayer experience, and I love it to death. But I'll always long for a career mode that gives me the same feeling as Guitar Hero and Rock Band. Sometimes, we all just want to be guitar heroes in a rock band. Yeah, I went there. Since you've made it to the end of this video, let me tell you another story. Albeit not as long of a story as the one about Guitar Hero and Rock Band. I've been in the market for a new razor, and Henson Shaving was recently brought to my attention. They sent me a razor for this video, and I gotta tell you, I don't think I've ever had a more effortless and comfortable shave in my life. I've never used a safety razor before this, but cartridge razors always felt like a gamble. I have to find the right angle because it moves around all the time, and because the cartridges have multiple blades, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. The blade on Henson's double-edged safety razor stays in one place, and it just glides along my skin without any guessing involved. Henson also has plenty of resources that help me stay informed on not just how to use the razor, but also why to shave with a safety razor in the first place, and their stance on innovation in the industry. I don't think I'll ever use a cartridge-based razor again after using the one Henson sent me, and I wholeheartedly recommend them. It was convenient timing that they happened to send me one for this video, but my expectations were thoroughly surpassed. And even when considering how often you personally shave, Henson's razors and blades are affordable too. If you'd like to take me up on my recommendation of Henson shaving, go to hensonshaving.com and enter this code at checkout to get 100 free blades with your purchase. Yeah, that's a lot of blades. Anyway, I've been Liam Triforce, and thanks so much for watching.